Today, I am going to be completing chapter 12 of How to Do Life. I got partway through it, and today I'm going to start this chapter with the primary negative emotions. So, there are six primary emotions: excessive desire, anger, pride, doubt, view, and ignorance. And there are the cognitive and the affective aspects of the mental functions that cannot be separated. So these are treated, while they are slightly different, they are so closely related, you really cannot separate them other than analytically. The cognitive aspects of the mind are thoughts, conceptualizations, and other mental events. The affective aspects of mind are the emotions and the associated feelings. The first three of these primary emotions are excessive desire, anger or hatred, and pride. The desire is mainly sensual desire. For all kinds of forms of emotional disturbance can be traced to these three. He doesn't say too much about anger at this time. Anger basically is wanting to get away from or destroy an object, something, an idea, an unpleasant experience, and so forth. He talks more about sensual desire. Trying to satisfy our sensual desires brings, in his words, a host of problems. First of all, many of our sensual desires are unobtainable, and it results in frustration or feelings of hurt, rejection, bitterness, resentment. None of these are pleasant. And the other is that if our sensual desires are satisfied, it's only temporary, because this occurs in the relative world where everything is temporary, and then more is needed. So there is this feeling of never being satisfied, never having enough, or else there is overindulgence, for instance, overeating and becoming obese. He didn't mention bulimia, but that's another problem. And then this overindulgence can lead to indolence, depression, and a host of other negative emotions. Again, negative emotions result in pain and discomfort and are going in the opposite direction from happiness, which is what we all want. Next, he goes into pride. He says that pride is almost the opposite of self-esteem. Genuine self-esteem is actually necessary to travel the path, that we have to feel that we have the ability to travel the path. So we need self-esteem, but pride is a fabricated strategy. It's used to intimidate, to frighten somebody or people, to present a false image of ourselves. And pride leads to all kinds of problems. The first type of pride he talks about is comparative pride, which is wanting to compare yourself with others. We can compare ourselves to someone that we think is better than us, or we can be comparing ourselves with our peers and constantly competing with them, trying to be one up on people that we think are our equals. Or those that we feel are lower than us will show off and make them feel bad or try to make them feel bad. So, due to impermanence, these comparisons are all relative and temporary, and they lead to frustration, disappointment, lack of fulfillment, self doubt, and anger. Then there is the pride of arrogance, which is refusing to believe there is anyone better or superior to you. And of course, the problem with that is you're not going to get many people to agree with you. And all kinds of problems are going to arise from that. A lot of times when you take that approach, it is because you actually underneath it feel that you are not as good as other people and you're trying to overcompensate. Another type of pride is boastful pride, always talking about yourself, trying to convince others of your greatness. This is very detrimental to your self esteem. Then there is self delusional pride, which is based on negative actions, based on all the wrong reasons that you're proud of being bad. Then there is egoic insecurity, which is constantly putting yourself down, telling yourself, I can't do this, I'm bad. Any negative messages that you're giving yourself. The problem with that is that this is actually very self indulgent, that you're proud that you're so bad. You're just focused on yourself. And this, of course, undermines self esteem. And then liking yourself becomes conditional. You'll like yourself only if you do something that earns your respect. These three emotions are supported by the next three, which are doubt, opinionatedness, and ignorance. Here is a quote about doubt. If we cannot make up our mind, we begin to become confused. We do not know what is beneficial or harmful, and so we are thrown into a state of doubt. With doubt, we go back and forth, not certain of which direction to go in, what action to take. And so when you throw that in with pride or desire or anger, it just makes things even more complicated. Now, opinionatedness. This is that we have strong aversion or desire or pride, and then we have opinions to support our feelings. We come up with all kinds of opinions that we call reasons for feeling the way we do, for our actions of body, speech, and mind. We develop tunnel vision. Strong doubt and strong conviction go hand in hand, and we go back and forth, back and forth. It turns into complete confusion. Which side is up? My own experience about opinions is that we might talk to other people about our opinions, but we generally try to have friends that have the same opinions of us that reinforce our opinions. Ignorance is the next one. And with ignorance, it is a form of negligence. We aren't able to use our good sense or our awareness of what is happening. As a result of ignoring that, we become discourteous, inconsiderate. We're not keeping tabs of what we're doing and how we're affecting other people, even though we wouldn't like it if others were treating us the way that we were treating them. Then there are secondary negative emotions, and he goes over these. There's a total of 20 of them. Our minds are quite complicated. These secondary emotions are used to construct our version of our separate reality. And again, there's a cognitive and an affective aspect, but they go together. And so we see through filters of these primary and secondary emotions, and they influence our actions of body, speech, and mind. They influence what we perceive and how we see things existing, and basically our version of ourselves and the world. So here, rage is a secondary emotion, and this is anger where we actually lose control, where we're just totally out of control. I remember once when I was in school, and probably it was high school, and I got mad and just totally lost it. And then the guy that I was yelling at, he said something like, the teacher is here. And he pointed, and I looked to where he was pointing, and I didn't even see the teacher, and I kept on yelling. That is rage. Resentment. This is anger that you hang on. You don't forgive and forget. It just festers inside of you. Needless to say, Pema Chodron says anger is like drinking rat poison and expecting the rat to die. And that's exactly what is going on here. And not only does it fester, but it can even grow. It can get stronger and cause you even more suffering. You become intolerant. Quote, it makes us excessively sensitive, too easily provoked, and lacking endurance. I also like to point out that in today's world, there are people out there that are called trolls. They purposely want to make you angry and stay angry. And by holding on to anger towards somebody, you actually might make them happy while you're making yourself unhappy. Concealment is the next, or a shyness, hiding our defects and shortcomings to others and not seeing them in ourselves. Denial is another word for this. Spite is the next one, wishing to say harsh words, take vindictive measures, attacks on others, written or spoken, trying to undermine other people. Then there's jealousy, and here this is related to pride as well as gain and loss. So we want what another has or wish they didn't have it. Avarice or greed is insatiable desire for goods, comfort, and wealth in the material world. And this is a subset of excessive desire. Number 7 is deceit, and this is related to both desire and ignorance. And it's using different strategies to get what we want, and it perpetuates both desire and ignorance. Dishonesty is the next, and it's pretending to be somebody that we are not. He uses the example of a confidence man. We believe we are clever. And that brought back memories of hearing some inmates talk about how their victims, I heard this primarily with drug dealers. The people that they were selling drugs to were helpless and would do anything for their drug, where they're proud of what they were doing and being superior. Then mental inflation, being concerned with one's external image and how you look to others and how you think you look to yourself, and you believe it. Then malice, being completely unkind. This is related to anger and mental inflation and pride. Quote, a person may be kind yet angry, but a malicious person, on the other hand, is incapable of love, compassion, or caring for anyone. Number 11 is shamelessness, ignoring or not realizing the consequences of one's actions and how they hurt others. This relates to desire, anger, and ignorance, all three of them. Guilt or lack of propriety, quote, motivated by excessive desire or anger, one is driven to do things that are detrimental to oneself and others. So it's desire or anger that motivates that. Lack of propriety. Depression, this is related to ignorance. This is a misapprehension of reality by failing to see one's richness, beauty, potential. And this can lead to anger and frustration. He has more to say about depression further on in the book. In fact, he has a lot to say about depression. Again, my experience of depression is that there's a lot of anger, and a lot of the anger is focused on yourself, and you are miserable and frustrated and feel powerless. A lot of suffering. The next is agitation. This is wanting to fulfill desire, but even perhaps successfully to a certain extent, but you're never satisfied and you become frustrated. And this, of course, just feeds more negative emotions. Then there's lack of trust. It's number 15. And this leaves the door open to all kinds of negative emotions about another person and about the world. You start thinking the worst of others, thinking the worst of the world, and it leads to paranoia. Laziness is number 16, and this is a type of personal neglect, and it can cause anger and it can cause frustration to arise. Frustration in that you are not getting anything done or you're getting very little done, and also anger. You feel kind of powerless. You can feel like a victim. Then there is recklessness. Your body, speech, and mind are not connected. You're not attuned to yourself or others. You don't have a real sense of what you are doing. And this just causes a lot of recklessness in body, speech, and mind, reckless behavior, saying things that maybe it would be better if you didn't say them, behaving in a reckless manner, doing things that endanger your body or your life. You've had a stroke or a heart attack, the doctor tells you you should quit smoking and you keep smoking. The next is forgetfulness. And this is unregulated emotional arousal, that we haven't learned to manage our emotions. The stronger our emotions, the more forgetful we become. In other words, we just let it all out. We forget what's beneficial to ourselves, what's beneficial to others. The next is lack of awareness. We fail to see much of anything. We don't see how our kleshas and our negative feelings are harming us. And then the last one is scattered mind, lack of control over sensory input, that whatever our senses grab, whatever we sense, our awareness grabs onto it and it takes us away. So to sum this up, all of this is from the Abhidharma. And the Abhidharma goes into great detail, various mental states, emotions, how our mind works, and so forth. If we can see how our emotions work and how they influence us and how we encourage them and how we suffer, then we are able to work on our kleshas. We're able to attain more happiness. We're able to eventually conquer the kleshas. If we can see the mechanisms, we can let go of the stuff that is harmful to us. So it's very important to familiarize yourself with all of these different types of emotions. The last quote from that chapter is, "It's important to have a comprehensive view of our emotional life in terms of our physical experiences, feelings, mental attitudes, beliefs, and factors related to our interpersonal experiences." Now we're on chapter 13, which is the relationship between cognitive activity and emotional experience. And these come from the Abhidharma, just like the last chapter did. And to review this a little bit here, the Abhidharma is one of the three collections of the Buddhist canon. You have the Vinaya, which is about the monastic codes, and you have the sutras, which are the actual teachings of the Buddha. And the Abhidharma have all kinds of commentaries about the sutras, as well as additional insight that various masters have written down over the ages. Prahlad Rinpoche says we can have improved emotional states advancing to an elevated state. He uses the term Arya, which is a Sanskrit word meaning noble. Or we can stay the same, or we can perhaps even go lower than we are. Either way, or any of those three ways, there's going to be ups and downs. If we manage our emotions properly, this will lead to more happiness, more fulfillment, and more meaning in our lives. So there's good reason to learn more about our emotions and thus be able to manage them. So to understand ourselves, we need to understand our human condition and appreciate the power of our mind. The cognitive aspects of mind are thoughts, conceptualizations, and other mental events. The affective aspects of mind are emotions and associated feelings. These feelings that accompany desire and other emotions are things like, dislike, acceptance, rejection, attraction, aversion, etc. They increase the intensity of the emotion. And there is a very strong link between the cognitive and the affective aspects of mind. And this is why we get so caught up with our emotions. All of this happens primarily on a semi or subconscious level. We're not really aware of what's going on. And as long as we're unaware that these delusory mental states will only have temporary happiness at best, because our happiness will quickly be destroyed by negative emotions. More lasting happiness, quote, is not purely associated with simple pleasure, but rather a deeper level of pleasure that comes from inner transformation and an increased capacity to experience our lives more broadly in a much richer and more profound way. In order to accomplish this, we have to understand how these delusory states are created and maintained. And of course, we are the creator and the maintenance person. This will help us to overcome them and transform them. We sustain these delusory states by our perception of ourselves and what we think is in our self interest. But we fail to do this in an intelligent manner. While we're seeking happiness and comfort and so forth, we often create more suffering and more unhappiness. This is the reason why we meditate, that meditation is a foundation practice, that this is a good place to begin self-care. It helps our mind calm down. It helps our mind clarify. It helps us see things more clearly. And our emotional states are very complex. It's like a web, Tralik Rinpoche talks about. He said it's connected with our beliefs, our attitudes, our feelings, our strong primary emotions, which I've just gone over, enhanced by our secondary negative emotions. And on top of that, we have thoughts, beliefs, attitudes, mental conditioning, and so forth. He now talks about klesha, uh, klesha meaning negative emotion and a negative state of mind. And it has three aspects. Quote, and this is from the Abhidharma, I'm not sure what text. A state of mind has a debilitating and corrupting influence on one's body and mind. Number two is these negative states of mind have the further effect of causing impediments in terms of successfully carrying out various activities and projects. So they frustrate us. They impede our efforts accomplishing what we want to accomplish. Three is our negative states or kleshas produce unruliness in one's body and mind. Our body is in a constant state of agitation. Then he goes on to describe how these negative emotions arise and what causes them. He then lists three causes. The first, he uses the Sanskrit word, which is vasanas, or psychophysical tendencies. This is deep-seated tendencies in the body and mind. And of course, it varies with the individual. Notice that it's not just the mind that we're talking about here, that this can be held in the body as well. The second is a triggering mechanism, and it acts as a catalyst that takes us to the same place over and over again. Negative states of mind and kleshas, and it varies again from person to person. The third is how we appraise the situation. Quote, the continuous indulgence in inappropriate ways of thinking. So, due to our habits, we keep minimizing, exaggerating, misinterpreting, and repeating the same patterns over and over and over again. Then he has a list here of 6 causes of emotional experience. The objective basis or the condition, and this is there's an object of the emotion, an object of expectation or frustration. It frequently is a person. Intentionality of the mind. The mind is always directed towards certain objects. And again, it depends on the person's habit. Some people collect antique tractors, and some people like to fool around with sexual partners. Then the third is attraction to sensory impressions, that we favor certain sensory impressions. Again, some people like hot peppers, some people like ice cream. Then the next one is how we communicate our emotions, and that is how we talk about them, both to ourselves and to other people. And again, all of this is very, very individual. Number five is our physical and mental habituations. We are pre programmed to respond in predictable ways. And this, of course, limits our ability to express our emotions. One of the slogans of the 7 points of mind training is do something different. Don't be so predictable. The sixth is what type of thoughts we have. We repeat the same thoughts over and over and over again in our heads. It's like reruns of a soap opera. As a result of these six variety of emotional experiences, we have all kinds of experiences, emotions, but it's very repetitious. So it can be very helpful to look into these processes, then look into your own emotions, especially your negative ones. It's also good to encourage the positive ones. He mentions briefly moral psychology here. Consider your sense of well being, what is actually good for yourself. Compassion turned inward is renunciation of the causes of suffering. So it's important for us to understand the causes of our emotion and to appraise situations, our beliefs, opinions, and so forth. Our negative states of mind can be very, very compelling. However, we need to understand that we created them. They weren't implanted in our mind. They didn't come from outside of us. Since we created them, they can be overcome. To put this in, shall we say, 21st century language, we installed the buttons in our mind and we can download the software to remove the buttons, uninstall the buttons. And these are not overcome by willpower. They are overcome by understanding them, understanding how they are generated, seeing the whole system, not just the parts. And then you work on one part at a time, not the whole thing, because it's not solid. It's made out of parts and smaller parts. And these smaller parts can be much easier to work with than the whole thing. A common problem is to try to tackle the whole thing using willpower, but willpower will not overcome them. It'll be more like a New Year's resolution. But if you understand them, you begin to see that there are cracks and fissures in it, and that there are parts, and you can work with the parts little by little. There's a Zen saying, I think it was Suzuki Roshi that said this: hasten slowly. The idea is to put effort into it. You will progress slowly with that effort and don't become disappointed or frustrated because it's one step at a time. And of course, sometimes you'll backslide. That's the way the world works. That's the way you are too. That's the way we all are going in the right direction, but we sometimes backslide, make mistakes that we wish we didn't make. The thing is, we're not perfect, and so we will make mistakes. But when we make mistakes with awareness, we'll realize eventually that it was a mistake and that we will do what we can to not make them again. If we think that, oh, I made a mistake that shows I'm a bad person, this goes back to that self-denigrating pride where you're always putting yourself down. It is totally unproductive. If you see that you're doing that, don't get down on yourself about it. Say, oh, I see it now. I'm going to do what I can to not fall into that habitual pattern of mine. You can turn mistakes and obstacles into stepping stones. Meditation is very important here to calm our mind down and to see more clearly. It's really good to encourage positive mental states. I've heard this from Galwan Karmapa and many other teachers. Lean into the positive, even if other people around you are saying you're crazy or you don't see things as they really are. Lean into the positive. If you can have more positive mental states, you'll start dismantling the negative emotional states. So, little by little, happiness and contentment become more stable, less conditional. They will come from within you. You will find that the happiness is inside of you, not outside of you. And the final two sentences in that chapter are: a happy frame of mind is accommodating, an unhappy state of mind is unaccommodating. Therefore, it cannot be happy very long. So it really is important to maintain a happy frame of mind the best that you can.